Hi, what's good, everyone? I'm not actually currently in the normal crib. I'm up in the attic, um, in England, so that's why I'm filming with my flashlight and whatever. But I just decided to upload a quick video on how to get an A in your IB extended essay. I was gonna wait until I got back home to film this usually, but then I thought, the year 11s won't be submitting too far off, and some will probably start writing it by now. So I did my EE in business management HL and I got an A. I forgot what it was. I think I had 30 out of 34. 30, yeah, something like that. So yeah, here are my few tips on how I got an A. I did actually start writing it quite late. My thing was scrambled. My draft, when we were supposed to submit the 4,000 word draft, it was like 2,500. So don't worry too much about as long as the quality of your EE is fine, the timeline you follow is whatever. Even though looking back, I would have managed my time better. Just don't stress if other people are because I was kind of panicking when everyone was like, my EE was already done and I hadn't even started. But at the end of the day, I got an A, so it's chill. So this is my advice. Step one is don't neglect the reflections. I neglected my first reflection, then I ended up asking for the thing to be reopened so I could rewrite it, which, had I just started, I would have just done the first reflection really well. But what you can't forget is those reflections are six marks, so they can really just make the difference between A or a B or a B and a C or whatever you're aiming for there. So just make sure that those reflections are organic. They don't need to sound smart, that's kind of a misconception that they need to sound wordy and smart. And don't make them try to avoid like a procedural, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. The thing I found with my the advice people gave me on the reflections was a lot of what not to do. So avoiding it being procedural, avoid it being fancy. So here's what you can do for your reflections, and what I did, which I found really, 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 really valuable, is write in ideas you rejected. And if I'm being honest, I made up ideas that I rejected. So say, at first I was considering this, but because of a lack of research or a lack of academic literature surrounding the topic, I chose to, reject that idea to mitigate unreliability in my data and things like that. So if you can show in your reflections decisions that you were about to make, but then you reflected on them and decided not to actually make them, that's just going to be that stands out to people marking the reflections, because they like the fact that you saw something that was attractive, but then you decided to reject it because of so and so reasons. So just show that you critically decided what to put in your EE instead of just seeing the next shiny thing and chucking it in there, because I did business that's based off tools and research and data sets. My company was Spotify. Sometimes I'd find things that were valuable to the company and valuable to my EE, and then in my reflection I would put, although this was so good to include, I decided to reject it because the author cited this other article which something like contradicted what he was saying, or just make stuff up but make it sound like you had a deep thought process in the research you chose. The reflections, all three of my reflections were just reflecting on the research I chose and why I didn't choose it, and progress I made. And also in your reflections, talk about speaking with your supervisor. And your supervisor can be the person that told you not to choose something. So like I said earlier, in that rejecting something, that can come from your supervisor, right? So you can say, I literally wrote in my reflections, I presented this idea to my supervisor and he advised that I change it, or I reject it, or I accept it. So and put that in your reflection, because then that shows that not only have you done the research, you also took the time to go to someone else with it and get a second opinion to validate what you're trying to say. I know I spent mad amount of time on the reflections, but that's because I reckon it's kind of a valuable thing to, it's like a 6 marks, right? And it's 5 or 6 easy marks that are giving you that A, that are pushing you into that 30 out of 34, 31 out of 34, right? People reject the reflections because it's kind of like, how many times have we done a reflection on something? But this time it matters. This time it's in the criteria. So don't reject it. My second piece of advice is constantly keep drafts. And when I've done this with IAs and stuff in the past, it gets really messy if you do it as a Word document. So how I do it is in OneNote. I make my own OneNote, then I just have tabs, draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, etc. And I chuck that in, and then I just copy paste it out of my Word document, put it in there, and then keep writing on my Word document. And then in like 2 days, when I've written a bit more, I'll copy it back out of the Word document and into tab 2 on a OneNote. So all my I only ever work on one Word document, but all my drafts are kept in a OneNote, which is just way more simple in my opinion, and you're not saving a million documents, and you always, I don't know, that's just how I've kept drafts in the past. Everyone tells you to keep drafts. For the EE now, you actually have to because of the whole AI thing anyway. So I think that's a mad easy way just to keep track of your drafts, just in OneNote instead of saving a million Word documents and losing them, because I've never really organized my files. It's just doing way too much. So that's one thing with just drafting. Because EEs are subject specific, I'm going to give a bit of advice on how I did my business one, but this can apply to anything if you guys are going to keep listening. How the business one works is, well, for me anyway, it was a tool, and then that just all applies to the organizational structure of Spotify. This is really important for all, especially business, is that you are not trying to, represent the company, okay? This might apply for, maybe not econ, I don't know how their E's work, but especially business, is some exemplars I've read in the past, right? They glaze the company, and that's just not on it, okay? They try and represent the company. I even found myself doing that while I was writing it too, is that I would try and promote the company and try and make them sound good, okay? You're an outside onlooker. You don't care how the company sounds, okay? It's a raw, cold, black and white analysis that you do from the outside, okay? Things are going to be bad that come out of it, and things are going to be good that come out of it. My research question was something like, to what extent does the organizational structure of Spotify, right? To what extent does not mean it's only positive things. That's why it's an extent, okay? There's going to be things promoting it and things that are pulling it back. So that's, at the end, it's kind of like, to a arguably moderate extent because of these good things, but these bad things. So to what, in English, for example, to what extent does, X do Y? You find evidence for both. And I literally made a table that had, because in the criteria, or at least, kind of how I was looking at it, is you want a balanced EE, right? So I wanted literally the same amount of word count to apply for driving forces and forces against. So then I would have I wanted my conclusion to say, I wrote my conclusion, just one word, moderate extent. That's all I wanted my EE to go down to by the second I started writing. Because then the examiner really thinks that you've looked at both sides, even though it could be to a strong extent, but your EE is just going to end up at a moderate extent and take answers from both sides, okay? So I drew up a table. I found articles from Google Scholar that supported, the organizational structure is good for profitability and all that. The organizational structure is bad for profitability and all that. And then half my essay was the things that push it, half my essay was the things that take it back, and then I knew my answer was going to be a moderate extent because I used half and half research. Then I got a balanced EE, then I got an EE that made it look like I looked at both perspectives, even though I kind of forced that into the EE. And yeah, because if you can just follow structural things, some people just naturally write better than others. I've never been too good at English, so I just try and apply these really rigid structures to how I write that I draw out from the criteria. And that rigid structure was just a half EE. Okay, the thing with research right at the start as well is I had mad sources. I had like 60 references or something at the end, right? Probably even more. Okay, that's good, okay? Sometimes I found the same pieces of information in 2 articles, and when I'd repeat that piece of information, I'd just drag in the other article, because why not? It made it look like you did more. And also, every single article gives you more perspectives, okay? So that's another good thing about how or to what extent questions is you can literally say this perspective, because you're using other people's information, right? So you say this perspective was brought in by this article. Whereas this perspective was brought in by a similar article which comments similarly on the same topic. However, they also bring up these things because even though articles can have crossover like a Venn diagram, right, they're going to have differences too. And you want to talk about those differences. If there's one takeaway you can get from writing the EE is you comment on research. Okay, when I first started reading exemplars, I thought you comment more on the research question and what you're trying to find out, but you more comment on what's already been said about the research question and bring it together, okay? Your EE is just a 4,000 word vessel for what people have already said about the topic. Everyone tries to tell you that you're putting something new into the field of your like IBEE. Really you're not. Really you're taking what's already been said and just making it a 4,000 word summary of 60 articles, okay? So you get the most valuable parts of all 60 of those articles. In business sense, you throw in a term and then you just combine all that, and it's mad simple at the end of the day. Like that was an easy A for me, I reckon. In terms of planning, like I said earlier, my time management was mad dodgy at the start. So just try and do like 20 minutes a day, even though it never ends up happening. But I think other subjects like business, I'm fairly sure is a really easy subject to do your EE for. So I was lucky to get it. Some people getting world religion and all that. I had a few friends that got world religion, and that just seems mad annoying to get that kind of subject. So I would say time management with those subjects where you have to speak to people and do those kind of things, be a lot more stricter. Business is easier to write up quickly. English, I think, is quite an easy EE to do as well. So make sure if you're in a tough subject, if you're in a subject that's tough, but you also like doing an experimental one like chem or physics, that's calm too, but you are going to have to be tighter with your time management. So just be careful with that as well. Some more practical advice on writing the EE is to ensure structurally you're kind of repetitive. And I definitely mean this in a business one, right? Is that establish your structure really, really early on in the EE and then just repeat that. I just went tool analysis, tool analysis, tool analysis, tool analysis, conclusion with an introduction at the start. Okay. And my introduction also, make sure you define any concept literally with a definition, right? So I did organizational structure. I drew up a little diagram of what it looked like at Spotify, and just define that. And then I went tool analysis, tool analysis, tool analysis. Because the first time the examiner reads a tool analysis, then it's easy to notice the tool analysis and the tool analysis after that. Honestly, like I can't really remember my EE, and that's just a bit that I'm trying to, a bit of advice just to get off early. And I get back home in like a week. So I'm going to open up my EE and make a really concise video on everything I just said. But I thought I'd just go on a bit of a speech on my EE just to give some early advice and just like so I have something to consistently upload to the channel. Cheers, guys.